Hmm. Yeah, that's definitely
Yeah,
something to.
I think there's not enough actual terror games anymore because when the Gothic genre came to the fore of literature,
Hmm.
with like Mary Shelley and stuff, and Byron and Dracula, Bram Stoker, all that stuff, there was this real distinction between two types of horror. So there was
Okay.
horror, your gore, your bodies, your horrible creatures, your monsters, and then terror, which is sounds outside your window and a weird, deathly smell. You know, the anticipation of seeing that. It's kind of sort of terror is the anticipation of seeing a corpse, and horror is seeing the corpse.
Hmm.
And I think that it's really nice to see recently a lot more games focusing on the terror aspect. So things like Soma, especially, I don't force you to see horrible things or gory monsters. It just kind of like Dead Space. What was so good about that game for me was the music, the sound design. It was so sparse and empty. You felt so alone, but it had these tension wires and stuff that really gave you this feeling of unease. And I find that much more enjoyable than a jump scare or a monster jumping out at me because yeah, that makes me jump, but I don't think that's scary. I get annoyed. I'm like, fuck you, I wasn't ready for that. Like my cat makes me shit myself when I'm like sitting down and when he runs across me. What really scares me is when I'm creeping through a corridor and I can hear something and my brain's just filling in the gaps. And I think that it's really cool to see that in horror games, and I hope that they do more of that.
I feel like one of my favorite moments of Dead Space was when you first like this like professor guy walks up to you, doesn't he? And like something bursts out of his chest, and he just like turns into like a crazy alien, or something attacks him and kills him. I just love that game. I love watching gory stuff. What's your favorite horror film, Joe?
That's tough. I love a lot of
Ooh.
horror films. Recently, it's probably the Evil Dead remake. I
Oh,
thought
really? I love that film. But
I
a
thought it
favorite?
was
That's interesting.
spot on. I never really liked the original Evil Dead because they're too campy, and I thought this one it was so grim. But no, my favorite horror film of all time is a film called Martyrs. I don't know if you count it as horror particularly. Um, uh, it's films like Saw and Hostel, these kind of shitty, cheap. Oh, look how horrible this is.
I like Saw and
Martyrs is a
Hostel, but
French
go
film.
on.
Martyrs is a French film which did that idea, but not silly, if that makes sense. It wasn't over the top. It was really hard to watch. And I got, we had this was about 3 years ago on Halloween. I got all my manliest dude bros over, and I was like, let's see if you guys can sit through Martyrs without making a noise. And I remember about 10 minutes in, every single one of them just squealed like little girls. Like, when a girl sees something horrible in like a horror film, they were like that through the whole thing. So if people want to see something really horrific and fucked up, watch the film Martyrs.
Or a Serbian film, I'd also recommend. That's pretty dark.
I
It's a
think
good
it's
thing to watch.
terrible.
I told one of my friends to watch The Human Centipede for the first time because everyone gives a Human Centipede a bad name because they say it's just like violent horror porn, whatever they call it. What's it called? Like gore porn,
Torture
whatever.
porn.
Torture porn. That's it. But in Human Centipede, they actually don't show that much of like them putting like if you don't know what the Human Centipede, I'll just describe it quickly. So basically, as a doctor, this car breaks down outside, and this doctor has a dream where he wants to make a creature, and that creature then to make it has like one digestive system. So he sews the mouth to the arsehole of the person in front of him, and it's like three people, so they're all sewed like
Absolute
mouth to
brilliant
ass.
cinema.
But the point of this though, right? So the first one, what's not scary is watching him do that because you don't really see it that much. What's scary is like when they're all crawling around the floor and stuff. He like cuts their muscles in their arms. They can't stand up. He refers to it as it. So imagine being part of this like three-man like monster, and you're just constantly called it. And I think that like loss of like personality and like the loss of sense of self to become like this evil or just this thing for this crazy doctor is probably more terrifying if you're in the middle of that than like anything else. If you want to see torture porn, watch The Human Centipede 2 because that basically is the same film. It's a film about a guy who watches it and is inspired by that film to then go and do it himself. And he has no medical training or anything, so he's there using like nails and stuff, and he does it with like 8 or so people, and it's absolutely horrific. I think someone gives birth while in the centipede, and like I'm not going to go any further, but it's pretty grim. Like I definitely recommend that if you want to throw up maybe or scare some children. Put it on your TV and put your TV by the window and just let people walk past and see it as they're going through.
I personally think that things like a Serbian film and Human Centipede aren't horrible. Like I watch it and I think this is like the retard vision of a 10-year-old. He's like, it's like a 10-year-old sat down and been like, oh, what if I sewed their bums to their mouths? And I'm there like, for real, dude? Like, have you seen what the plot of the third one is? An entire prison. Like,
The third one I had to turn off halfway through because like I just couldn't watch it anymore. But like
I think they're awful personally. No, I thought a really good horror film recently was one called Starry Eyed.
I haven't seen that.
It was I think it might be on Netflix, but it was so good because you just didn't know what was going on, and that's what I think makes a good horror film is when you just can't work out what the fuck is up. I don't want to say anything about it because people need to. This is the kind of film you need to watch with no understanding of what happens. But I think that was really good.
All I get is Ellie Goulding when I Google Starry Eyed. Starry Eyes, is that what it's called? Yeah.
Starry Eyes or Starry Eyed, yeah, maybe.
Starry Eyed.
Came out 2014, I believe.
Yeah. How about you, Rob? Do you watch horror films? Or you don't, do you? You're not scared by anything, are you?
I didn't say not scared by anything, but I don't find them effective enough to make it worthwhile watching a film with such bad story. Generally, I liked The Japanese Ring.
Oh my god, don't, please. I've only just stopped dreaming about it.
That one was genuinely, that was just weird. I've watched. Yeah, it's weird.
Hearing that next to Human Centipede just puts horrible images in my brain.
Human Centipede, like Jack said, was just the deluded thoughts of a 10-year-old brought to a film, and it was poor. It was just boring. I don't know if it counts as horror. I did watch something called The Fourth Kind, which was kind of like a film documentary thing based on people who had had alien interactions, but they added some what you're told is live recorded footage from a psychiatrist's recording of their patients.
Okay.
And some of the stuff that happens to the patients on the live recordings is weird. It's very strange, and to the point where you can't quite work out how they'd be faking it if they were trying to fake this condition they were given. And they get so weird at some points that it then cuts to the actors part because they can't show what did actually happen because it's just too much. That was pretty traumatizing. That was bizarre. But yeah, I think actual films I've just never really found anything that works.
We should come to my house and watch The Human Centipede 2 sometime.
I've seen it. I'd rather not watch it again, but I can do.
I like the chat. The chat saying the scariest thing is Axe smell. You know, Axe deodorant, like dark chocolate or temptation. That's an interesting.
Oh god, yeah.
Hey.
God, let me see what I throw up. What else is there? What's scary as hell when you're 7 and you have a night out with your mates and you're watching it at midnight?
I didn't go on
The Ring. That's an.
I didn't go out when I was 7 either, but you know.
No, I watched The Ring when I was very, very young when I watched The Ring, and I remember at the time I had a CRT TV at the end of my bed. So I watched this fucking film. I go to bed, and all I can do is look at that TV and think, if that turns on, she doesn't have to kill me because I will leave this mortal plane instantly. I will spirit walk the fuck out of here because no, thank you.
Have you heard of night terrors before? What they are?
Night terrors.
Okay, so this is pretty scary. So I watched this documentary the other night, and what it was about is it's about this thing called night terror. So what it is, when you go to sleep, sometimes you can get to this point where you're sort of like you're just about falling asleep, and you feel like you can't move and your body's trapped, and then you see someone like walk toward like a dark figure like walk towards you as you're lying there and you can't move. And if you watch, and there's this documentary and it's about all these people who have experienced this, and they all say that someone walks up to you and then they sort of climb on top of you, put their hands on you, and you can't do anything and you're just lying there and you're like terrified. And after I watched this documentary, I thought back to when I was younger, and I definitely had like times where I was lying there and I thought there was like a dark figure stood at the end of my bed, but obviously there actually wasn't. And one of the things they kept saying in this documentary was like, every time like someone mentions it, you talk about it, and I go to bed and I wake up like, and I have one that night. And I was watching this film like with my headphones in, closing my eyes, trying to get to sleep at night. And I was thinking, yeah, I may have had something before. And then the way they know it's like not a dream, or it is a dream, is that when you wake up and you feel like you haven't been asleep, and you look at your clock and it's only been like 5 or 10 minutes or so. So I'm lying there and I'm trying to get to sleep, and then I start to feel like I'm stuck in my bed, and I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, but I'm sort of, it's like a bit lucid though, because I'm like, I've just watched this documentary, so I'm like, but it felt so real. So I felt like I was getting up and like moving towards my door to like shout at my roommate to like tell him I couldn't move or something. And then I'd like open the door, and then I'd like open my mouth and I'd try and scream, and it would just be like nothing would come out, and then I'd get like sucked back onto my bed, and then I kept doing that over and over again. And at one point I thought I heard my phone ring, so I tried to reach over and I couldn't grab it, and then I just sort of lay there, and then after about, I don't know how long it was, maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, then I just sort of like woke up and I was like, whoa, and like sat up, and it felt like I hadn't been asleep at all, and I looked at my phone, it hadn't rung at all, and I was like really creeped out, and then because I just watched that documentary, I was like, well, that's what happens. But yeah, that was like the other week to me, and I really recommend you watch this documentary while falling asleep, because like that's apparently what induces it. So there you go.
Chat's mentioned that that's lucid dreaming, and yeah, I was going to say that too. Lucid dreaming is actually a really well documented phenomenon that a lot of people can actually achieve by choice.
But
and night terrors, what they are is you're lucid dreaming, but you're not aware you're lucid dreaming, so you don't realise that you're creating a feedback loop where you're freaking yourself out, and then through that creating horror for yourself. Because I had a friend who went through all that, and the reason that there's a lot of common experiences is like someone lying on top of you is because when you're lucid dreaming, you lose all muscle control. Yeah. So it feels like you're really heavy, and if you ever get in that state again, Tim, imagine some really awesome shit, because you can genuinely, like, people have learned to create whole worlds and lives and stuff through lucid dreaming. It's really interesting for them.
I don't want to explore my mind really. Like, I don't really know.
Me either.
It's probably for the best.
I'll imagine the human centipede happening to me while I'm lying there. Like, no, don't go near my mouth.